let's wait just another minute or two to get started for a few more people to join us. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started this morning? We're missing, I think, only one student now, and I imagine our clients are going to pop in and out for each of their student groups presentations. So right now it's lots of familiar faces, but we are recording this, which is going to be shared out with our clients and students, any of you that are interested in having a final copy. So my name is Alexa Schreier. I am the instructor for Environment 480 Sustainability Studio at the UW's program on the environment. And we are here today for the Sustainability Studio final presentations. So I am very excited. I love everything about this class. As a student, now I say that a lot, but the final presentations are particularly exciting just to see all the hard work the students have done all quarter come together to really represent, the hard work that they've put into these projects. So our class, Sustainability Studio, just to give a little bit of background and context for these projects, it's an upper level environmental studies elective that's kind of like an introduction to consulting. It really kind of gives students the opportunity to learn about effective project design and project management, all while working with the client on some type of sustainability issue. So the topic for our class changes every quarter, which keeps it dynamic and exciting. And this quarter, of course, we were focusing on sustainability through nonprofits. So all of our client partners are nonprofit organizations at various scales, from smaller local organizations to quite large global organizations. But it presented an exciting opportunity for the students and I in class to talk about what it means to really try to address sustainability when working with organizations that are in the nonprofit sector versus other types of organizations or agencies. I want to say a huge thank you to all of our clients. I've seen a few more hop on, and I'll reiterate this at the end, but this class fundamentally would not be possible without our client partners that are willing and excited to work with students throughout the quarter. So a huge thank you to all of you and for putting time in to work with these students on their projects and for giving them real challenges to tackle. This class, I get a lot of feedback from students that what they love is that these projects are real and impactful. And again, that's only possible because we have community partners like you all. So just a little looking ahead, we have the final presentations today, and then the students' final reports are due next Wednesday. So clients, I will be reaching out this afternoon, just kind of laying out next steps as well. And then I'll be following up again next week sharing with you the students' final reports, a copy of their presentation slide decks, and then also this recording file as well, so that if you want to go back and reference the presentation or share it, you can do so. So do just keep an eye out for those follow-up things. But if you have any other questions, please do let me know. And I think that that's most of what I had. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the students. How this works is each presentation is about 10 minutes, and then we'll have 4 to 5 minutes after each presentation for any questions. Feel free to dump questions in the chat, or just go ahead and ask them to the students as soon as they wrap up their presentation. We have 5 presentations we are working through today, so we'll probably end up wrapping up, if we manage to stay on schedule, which I'm going to try really hard to do, right around 12:50 or so. And of course, for any of our clients that have to hop out after your student's presentation, no problem at all. Thank you for being here to see. So let me change my screen sharing settings. All right. So our first group, we had a really interesting situation this quarter where one of our clients is the Nature Conservancy, and they hosted 2 projects that are kind of like sister parallel projects working in 2 different regions. So you'll hear some similarities between those groups and then kind of vast differences. So it's a really interesting setup. So we're going to start with those 2 presentations today, and our first group focused on Eastern Washington. So group, you can go ahead and screen share. And whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
Hi, so our group worked with the Nature, I'll wait for it to load. Okay. Our group worked with the Nature Conservancy, specifically focused in Eastern Washington. Our team members include Elise, Aria, and myself, Faith. Starting off with our table of contents, we first introduce our project goal and then go into our methodology, basically how we conducted our research. Next, going into our results and data that led to our recommendations. And lastly, we go into the next steps of this project.
So this quarter, my group members and I have been working with the Nature Conservancy in the development of a new project that aims to build constituent support from the bottom up by collaborating with stakeholders and community members in Eastern Washington. And the Nature Conservancy's strategy in this project was to identify and target the so-called movable middle population in this region, and then to invest resources in engaging and mobilizing this population. So what is the movable middle? A 2008 study by the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication identified that there are 6 unique audiences in America that all respond to climate change in different ways. And this ranges on one end from alarmed groups, and these include individuals that are the most concerned and the most motivated, and then ranges all the way down to those that are dismissive, and this includes people that are the least concerned and the least motivated. So this analysis of American opinions really allows us to identify a crucial demographic in the fight for climate action, and that is the movable middle. And the movable middle tends to include people that are in the concerned, cautious, or disengaged groups, and oftentimes includes individuals that might think that climate change is an important issue to address, but they could find that addressing the issue is either too time consuming, too costly, or in some way compromises their core values. So this project was really created because the Nature Conservancy believes that their funding and resources can be most effectively allocated by targeting and swaying the opinions of this specific demographic by increasing their engagement and their concern for climate-related issues.
So in order to reach our project goal and identify the movable middle for our region, we identified 5 parts to our project. So the first one was starting with demographic research in order to understand our residential composition and climate of the region. We then did research to understand key stakeholder groups for Eastern Washington and map their relationships and connections to one another. We then went further into researching contact information for what we considered to be the top stakeholders of the region. And after conducting all our research, we went on to develop some recommendations for our client and summarized all our findings into a presentation, one that's separate from this one, as a final tool for them to use. To go into some of the specifics for our research methods, we were really grateful to have been provided with a list of resources from our clients to help us get started. And this included sources like the US Census Bureau and the Washington Environmental Health Disparities Map. From there, it was a lot of Google. It meant looking at county directories and using key phrases like Eastern Washington economy and climate action groups. Our third main resource was the UW's Climate Impact Groups page, which provided useful reports like the Unfair Share, as well as individual research papers. And lastly, we relied a lot on government websites for sources of credible data for our region.
From our demographic research, the figure on the left highlights Washington's 5th Congressional District and also includes the cities we focused our research on. Through our data, we found that most of the population was predominantly white, yet there are higher populations of Hispanic and Latino individuals than in Western Washington. Sensitive regions include Columbia, Garfield, and Whitman counties that are disproportionately affected by climate change. This region is represented by Kathy McMorris Rogers, who serves as Eastern Washington's chief advocate in Congress.
To give some background to Eastern Washington's climate, the biggest takeaway is that it resides in a rain shadow driven by the Cascade mountain range, which makes the climate warmer and drier than the western side. For the 5th Congressional District specifically, there's mountain ranges north and south of the borders, along with a dry basin in the middle, making this region have greater climate variability than typically the rest of Eastern Washington. Because of this specific climate, the biggest climate threats facing the area are warming, water stress and drought, flooding, and wildfires. And this can impact important industries like agriculture or health services.
So unfortunately, the effects of climate change are often disproportionate across communities because the risk a community faces is ultimately a function of their vulnerability and their exposure levels. And so this model here on the screen, which was originally produced by the IPCC, highlights the unfortunate reality that some communities, and oftentimes the communities that are disadvantaged or minorities, oftentimes do face a heavier burden when it comes to climate impacts. And one of these communities is in Eastern Washington. So in our research, we found that many of the counties in Washington's 5th Congressional District face higher than average environmental exposures, and this is paired along with increased socioeconomic disadvantages, which puts people in this region at a particularly high risk, which is why we found that this region is particularly important to study and engage with. So despite the high risk of the population of Washington's 5th Congressional District, only 51% of residents believe that climate change is caused mainly by human activities, and this is 6% below the national average. Additionally, only 47% of residents believe climate change will harm them personally, and only 38% discuss global warming at least occasionally. So it's this population's high risk in the face of climate change, along with the lower than average climate opinion and engagement, that makes it really clear that it's crucial to identify how to increase engagement and build constituent support for climate action within this region.
In order to engage diverse groups and encourage climate action, we identified specific stakeholder groups that we felt were most representative of the 5th Congressional District demographic, which included youth groups, environmental organizations, NGOs, key industries, and tribes. From our stakeholders, we identified 5 organizations that we believe would be most beneficial in engaging the movable middle in Eastern Washington. First, the NAACP has been established for over 100 years and advocates for communities of color. Partnering with them will give the Nature Conservancy insight and knowledge within the Eastern Washington community. The NAACP also encourages youth engagement, and they have potential to collaborate with our next stakeholder, the Boys and Girls Club. The Boys and Girls Club works towards assisting young people in becoming productive citizens who are engaged with positive change. The club offers a variety of programs for young adults and particularly works with those less advantaged. Working with outside organizations to implement more environmentally focused programs could increase youth participation in climate action. Third, moving on to the Colville tribe, it is the largest federally recognized tribe in the 5th Congressional District, and they have multiple departments already devoted to environmental improvement, such as climate change, fish and wildlife, and forestry departments. This could provide a lot of insight into the tribal community. Fourth, the CSNAR has already completed research on the impacts of climate change and on the agricultural industry. Collaboration with the Nature Conservancy would allow for further research and networking between the education and agricultural sectors. Lastly, Conservation Northwest is an organization currently working to continue and further extend our strategic collaboration with marginalized, underrepresented, and disadvantaged communities. They also invite new voices and perspectives into their work. This could also be aided by the Nature Conservancy collaboration and funding.
So based off our final analysis, we were successful in identifying who we thought was the movable middle for Eastern Washington. Our project wasn't without some shortcomings, however, and due to time constraints, we were unfortunately unable to develop surveys or interviews, which was something we had envisioned as a potential part of the project. Overall, our results provide a useful tool for the TNC by highlighting targetable groups in Eastern Washington, allowing them to efficiently use their resources to advocate for climate action in that area. After our analysis, we were able to develop 3 key recommendations and next steps to further the project. The first is outreach, which sort of picks up where we left off. In this section, we advise our clients to contact the top stakeholders provided in the stakeholder contacts deliverable and develop interviews or surveys for interested parties. We believe this will further the knowledge for Eastern Washington and provide insight into the experiences and values of these groups, which we hope will have a positive social impact. We then recommend connecting existing stakeholders based on shared values to strengthen and expand the reach of this project. As we stated earlier in our top 5 stakeholders section, groups with a shared interest could be connected, such as the NAACP and the Boys and Girls Club, or the WSU Center for Sustaining Agriculture, and another stakeholder we identified, which was the Far West Agribusiness Association. Ideally, this will strengthen the local economy and community of Eastern Washington and develop a greater environmental consciousness. Lastly, we advise the further development of our final presentation to be presented to the Washington chapter of the Nature Conservancy, which we hope will ensure further provisions and resources to continue to grow the project. So here are a few of our references. And this concludes our presentation, but we wanted to give a special thank you to our clients, Jamie and Keith, for their guidance and patience throughout the quarter. You guys were awesome, and we really appreciated being able to work with you both and hope this research helps in your future endeavors. Thanks for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions for this group? All right. I think you all might be getting off easy then. Nice job. I know applause is not the same again over Zoom, but
Thank you.
all
everyone.
right. Yeah, thank you all. That was fantastic and a great start to our round of presentations today. So with that, like I said, the Nature Conservancy hosted 2 projects that you'll see a number of similarities and then differences in. So we are just going to move straight on to our second group who focused on Southwestern Washington.
All right. Can everyone see my screen? Awesome. All right, so hi, we're the other Nature Conservancy team, but we focused on environmental issues in the Southwest Washington region. I'm Carrie, and today we have Silas, Jaylene, and Charlie from my team presenting our work. So during this quarter, our goal was to build constituent support, mainly looking at the movable middle for climate action in Southwest Washington and learn about local issues of interest to residents. So as the Eastern Washington group mentioned, the Nature Conservancy shared with us the Yale Program on Climate Change Communications paper that spoke about the importance of the movable middle, which is a group that falls in between 2 extremes and is the most receptive to hearing another's viewpoint. So for our project scope, the alarmed, may be like environmentalists, scientists, activists, whereas the dismissive may be the far right group who could kind of care less about climate issues, and their community is not very like receptive. So in our research, we dove deeper into who we wanted to be, or who was in the movable middle. And so Jaylene will talk about this in a later slide. So today we'll present demographic research, who our stakeholders are in the area, who are already involved or who could be involved, and then the next steps to build constituent support. Before diving into research findings, here's a brief overview of our methodology. We began with demographic research to better understand our region, which then helped us find some key stakeholders, led us into formulating recommendations for TNC, and then we will present our findings, recommendations to TNC in a final report with resources attached, a stakeholder contact document, and a high-level presentation for them to present to their Washington chapter or any other teams they want to influence.
So here's a map of the region that we were focusing on. This is the 3rd Congressional District of Washington. So now we're going to go into demographics, which are the industries that the people work in, the race, age, sex, and their climate vulnerabilities. So we found that most people in the district work somewhere in management, business, science, or the arts. And as you can see here, the smallest chunk is in natural resources, construction, and maintenance. If we break it down even further, only 1% of the entire workforce is in a fishing, farming, or forestry occupation. So this shows us there's not really a huge economic force on environmental interests in the area. Next up, we have race and ethnicity. These data points all include Hispanic and non-Hispanic populations. We found that the majority of people are white, sitting at about 86%. And this leads us to our next question. How might race affect environmental concern? The Yale program on climate change communication conducted a study on racial and ethnic, on which ethnic and racial groups care most about climate change in the US. And their research found that the Hispanic and Latino and Black Americans are much more likely to be concerned about global warming than white Americans. Oh, and then next we have the age and gender. We found that the median age is about 40 years old, and the youth population has been steadily increasing over the years. This is important information because the Nature Conservancy is interested in targeting the youth and the so-called movable middle, and these are the groups that are kind of most receptive to hearing new ideas. We also know that there's nearly a 50-50 split of male to female residents, which is more interesting, is that there are gender differences in views and understanding of global warming. And the same Yale program on climate change communication found that women are more likely to be worried about global warming. And this could imply that the male audience might be more of our movable middle, cautious and disengaged target range. And lastly, we have regional vulnerability. And the top 3 environmental concerns we found for this region are coastal hazards, deforestation, and rising temperatures due to climate change. In our next section, Silas will go over the stakeholders we found.
Okay, so first that we decided to comprise as our stakeholder map, and it's just a chart of all of our stakeholders. And the resources here in Southwest Washington tend to naturally gear towards a higher interest audience, which is also apparent in the Pacific Northwest attitude when it comes to the environment. It's been our goal to find groups to find a passion for the world around them, but through the projects they perform, because with their passion towards doing the things they love to do, we can direct it towards our goal of getting the communities there to become more environmentally involved. As a group, we pulled together a top 5 list that we thought would suit the region in effectively reaching the community members' hearts. There's a mixture of stakeholders who have a high interest in power, which is what we focused on, and those along the lines of being passionate about their hobbies as being part of the crowd part, where we believe the most influence could stem from reigniting community members' interests through your mission by working through their passions. Keep in mind that our total stakeholder list comprises of resources that aren't focused on the environment, but could be used as a springboard for integrating sustainable outreach in the communities they serve. The first one that we have is the Cascade Forest Conservancy. And as a group, we wanted to bring in a wide range of resources. And in this case, there's a focus on bringing in more influential players who have the capability of making stronger impact on Southwest communities as a whole. Bringing in niche groups and larger, more well-known associations will help broaden the perspective of the community members here in Southwest Washington, which will make it easier for us to find ways to connect with them on a more direct level that speaks to their needs and passions for a greener future. The next one that we have is Clark County Green Schools, also known as EarthGen, as their rebranding. And environmental action often needs a resource that holds a greater impact on the communities it serves. And Clark County Green Schools has been present in Southwest Washington for a while, and it serves as a reliable resource for enabling environmental impact directly through school programs. The third one that we have down is Friends of Clark County, and the Friends of Clark County really serves to improve all aspects of the communities in Southwest Washington in a greener way. They are a larger organization that covers the entirety of Clark County, which covers both rural and urban aspects of the region quite effectively. We believe that working with a well-known group like this will inspire other counties within the vicinity to improve their own services towards the same missions within their own counties, because there's a sheer lack of support for involving greener communities in surrounding counties such as Cowlitz and Skamania. The fourth one is the Washington Trail Riders Association, and they're a very niche but large group in Southwest Washington that serves as a great resource to consider when talking about the connection between a realistic community life and the environment. People within this community are passionate about being in nature, where many of their hearts lie in preserving what the world provides, but don't necessarily have a direct connection to enacting any action in doing so, especially when it comes to conserving and preserving the environment through their hobbies. And the last one is Trout Unlimited. We wanted to provide a wide range of community resources that best suit the hobbyists in Southwest Washington. And Trout Unlimited is another one of those crowd options to consider. Remember how we said that male audience is going to be our target here? This could really play into that, because clean water and proper management of aquatic resources is vital for this region and these hobbyists. So providing a community resource that caters to these environments was important for us to put on the table as an option.
Thank you, Silas. I'm going to be talking about our group's recommendations for the Nature Conservancy. For this project, we split our recommendations into short-term and long-term categories. Starting with the short term, this quarter, our group used research and personal connections to find stakeholders that we best think represent the Southwest Washington region. Since we were not able to conduct interviews ourselves due to time constraints, we formatted our deliverables to help the Nature Conservancy make the next step, which in this case is contacting our stakeholders and conducting interviews. We also recommend that the Nature Conservancy narrows down their scope by using regional climate data we have provided to connect deeper with the people living in this region. In the long term, we see this project as a good starting point for the Nature Conservancy to establish connections in the community. In turn, this will allow the Nature Conservancy to manage ties and relationships in this region, which will open up many opportunities. We believe that these connections are the first step for getting involved in sparking conversation on climate change in Southwest Washington. Speaking for my whole group, we had a wonderful time working on this project, and we'd like to give special thanks to Keith and Jamie from the Nature Conservancy for working with us this quarter. If there are any questions, our group will take them now.
Actually, I have a quick question for you guys. Great job, by the way. I was wondering, how did you guys evaluate like passion for each of your stakeholders when you're doing your power mapping?
I could answer this question a little bit. When we were kind of gearing passion, we really wanted to take a look at what do the people in this area like to do. They have close access if you're thinking about the context of the area. Regionally, they're right next to the Columbia River. There's also a lot of passion towards being in the environment along the Columbia Gorge and just in the area. I know there's a lot of direct connection that the tribes have to the land in that area. And we really wanted to kind of work around what people like to do, because I feel like, you know, people down there are not going to go out of their way to join an environmental group that's geared towards primarily doing that. But if you can find a way to integrate their passions in their hobbies towards the missions that we want in establishing a greener and more sustainable community, there's a lot you can do to work with there. Like there's a ways that we can use the passion towards our hobbies and make aspects of those hobbies more sustainable. Like I know for like fishing, there are ways that we can manage what and how much gets fished, or with the Washington Railroaders Association, there's ways to limit like areas on the trails and in the environment where you can't ride there to preserve certain parts of the environment. There's ways we can integrate that sort of thing, but it's much easier to speak to people through the things that they already love to do, if that makes any sense.
Definitely. Thanks, Silas.
Group, it looks like you've got a few questions coming in through the chat.
All right, I can still talk a little bit more about that. I'll kind of address both Mary's questions and Jamie's questions kind of at once because they're kind of related. So when we were conducting our top 5, we really wanted to gear towards groups that were more environmentally intact. But when you look at our total group, our total group listing, we put in a lot of options that range from the entirety of those who are going to be disproportionately affected by climate change. We understand that tribal members, BIPOC members, and women, children, and families all across Clark County will be more affected by what's going to be happening when climate change starts to happen. So we threw in as many different types of groups as we could find, really trying to dig into like, okay, what types of people are these stakeholders contacting? I know the YWCA deals with women and children and families affected in Clark County. And it was mostly centered in Clark County because that's where everything centers. That's where most people live in Southwest Washington. But we also wanted to bring in other groups like the SSP or the SPP that kind of cover Kalama, and there's just different areas that we really wanted to touch upon that weren't Clark County, because those people in rural areas are more likely to be affected, and even less so especially BIPOC community members in rural areas in Clark County, or not Clark County, but Southwest Washington as a whole would be even more affected. So we're really trying to find ways to address these issues. But when there's already a lack of presence that helps and supports those types of groups, especially in an environmental way, we are really trying to find ways to work around that and see what connections can we find and help TNC get in contact with other groups like that in that area to provide support, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and to add on to that, so I think you asked, how did we narrow it down and what we were looking at? So obviously there's like land and water. And I know like the stakeholders I researched, it was mainly tribes and environmental groups. And I noticed that a lot of the tribes were concerned about like either ocean or river health, which affected fishing. And so we wanted to get into like which groups are using that, and like how can we get them involved in kind of environmental issues and impact that area. So that's one of the reasons why we chose like Trout Unlimited, and kind of focused on more the like niche groups that are a part of these bigger issues, but maybe aren't doing anything to support or combat them. And then Jamie, how did you consider disproportionate climate impact within your stakeholder analysis? So yeah, kind of as mentioned, we kind of went from like bigger picture of like what are the overall like biggest climate impacts in this area, and then how can we like infiltrate it from bottom up. And so we looked at like low and high power and low and high interest, and we kind of put so like high power, high interest those are the people that we kind of are targeting in our top 5 stakeholders. I don't know if that answered people's questions, but
If you wanted a more specific example, I guess for that, when it comes to direct climate impact, a huge issue in this area is deforestation with the ever imposing presence of suburbanization. Like Camas and Vancouver, they're really trying to expand their city limits, but in doing so, they're just mass clear cutting forests and getting rid of public park access in some areas, smaller parks, but it's still a huge issue. And especially for people who love to hike or people who love to ride horses out there, it's really, really hard for those community members, especially rural ones, to do the things that they love when they're just mass clear cutting everything. So, which is why we really wanted to cater into like niche groups who are really passionate about what they do. Like, I don't know if you've talked to any of the Southwest Washington people who like to fish or ride horses or hike, but oh my goodness, they are just full of love for what they like to do. And they'll do anything to preserve, doing what they love to do best. So we are really trying to kind of apply, okay, how's the environment affecting these people? And how can we speak to those people's hearts directly to get some gears turning and get some inspiration reignited for combating these issues that are imposing?
That's great. Thank you both, especially Silas and Carrie, for digging into those questions. Nice job. All right. Oh, my, of course, a little late. We are going to move into our next presentation, which is our group that worked with the Cascade, Cascadia Climate Action, CCA, all around urban forestry health. So I'm going to turn it over to you all.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our presentation today. We'll be talking with you about the importance of community engagement in urban forestry for climate change mitigation. And our project was done with Cascadia Climate Action. My name is Madison, and my other group members are Michaela, Montana, and Michaela. As a quick run through for our presentation, today we're going to be doing an introductory to urban forestry, showing our method and results, some of our next steps, conclusions, and then a few closing thoughts. For this project, our research question was what engagement opportunities are available in the Seattle region to maximize the health of urban forests. Some objectives that we created were to contribute an accessible platform for those interested in volunteering for these programs, and we wanted them to be able to pick an organization based on their own individual goals, abilities, and interests, because sometimes it can be overwhelming how many opportunities are available and how to find these. This matters because as we increase access, we increase volunteer numbers, and this spreads awareness of the importance of urban forests and overall creates an impact on climate mitigation. Cascadia Climate Action is founded by Mary Manis, and their mission is to assist the public in getting informed, involved, and taking action on climate issues. One example of this is their one-stop calendar of climate events shown below. As you can see, they put up a good amount of events being taken place in the Seattle community, both in person and online, and it's very easy to filter through and find opportunities and events to attend. So you may be asking yourself, what is an urban forest? An urban forest is defined as an area with trees, plants, shrub, or greenery of any kind that can be found within an urban city. Urban forests are important because they help us to mitigate climate change, including heat island effects. They connect people to their environments. They foster relationships within the communities, add natural beauty to our urban areas, and provide a plentiful amount of health benefits.
So this brings us into our methods. We had 3 categories that we were focused on during this project. These were writing the interview questions, conducting interviews, and then summarizing those responses. Our main objectives for these were all to ultimately gain a strong understanding of the organizations that we interviewed and to condense what we learned so that it's accessible for potential volunteers in learning the CCA's mission. So why did we choose interviewing over other modes of data collection? Interviewing allows for dialogue, follow-up questions, and personal connection. And this really allowed us to get the most genuine and thorough answers from our interviewees, and it gave us a good idea of who they are and what their organizations stand for. So the first step was to write the interview questions. We broke this down by starting with creating a basic set of interview questions that can be applied to any organization. We then conducted research on each organization using their websites and their online presence. Then using our basic set of questions, we identified where the gaps in basic information were, and we used that to inform our personalized question lists, which included questions that were open-ended, dug deeper into their values, and clarified the information that we learned. We then conducted interviews. We had to start by contacting the organizations and assigning responsibilities within our group, things such as note-taking, asking questions, sending the Zoom, and we rotated this for experience. During the interviews, we learned how to maintain the flow of conversation, so making sure we were asking questions during times that made sense during the conversation. And we also learned how to make space for our interviewees to give their full, thoughtful responses, but also how to keep control of the interviews and keep it moving. Here we have a list of everyone we had the pleasure of interviewing this quarter in the order that we interviewed them. We started with Freeway Estates Community Orchard, then moved on to Tree Pack, Proterra, Grow It Forward Restoration, Plant Amnesty, Trees for Seattle, and WSU Forest Health Watch. And on the right-hand side, we have all the names of the people we got to interview and the dates. Here we have a very short clip to give you an idea of what these interviews look like.
You know, I think people really feel a great sense of personal connection to the environment when they volunteer for us.
I think it really comes down to the fact that people feel we can kind of cultivate like a sense of ownership in our communities.
I think you'd like the people you meet in Plant Amnesty. We're involved in things that really make you feel good. You know, they feed your soul. So if your soul's a little hungry, come on over.
And then, of course, once the interviews were finished, we had to summarize the responses. Main parts of this was putting ourselves in the shoes of potential volunteers and determining what questions they would have when they go to the CCA website. We then also learned a lot during this interview process, so we had to find ways that we could turn this into tools to give to CCA. And this all culminated in summary Q&A pages of each organization, a table, and surveys, all of which will be expanded upon later.
So after completing our interviews and gathering all of our data, we created this little word cloud here, highlighting some of the key phrases that were used in the interviews. You'll see welcoming, community, restoration, education, health, all keywords that were talked about in our interviews. And some of our results were, one, that all of these organizations are very accessible and welcoming to people with a variety of experience. So no one has to come in knowing exactly what to do. There are many opportunities for people. Another key finding was that urban forests are not only vital for the health of our environment, but they're also vital for the health of our communities. They provide a way for people to gather, to hold events, to meet new people through these volunteer opportunities, and they're just a way to foster new relationships within our community. Lastly, we also found that volunteering in these urban forests helps to foster relationships between people and the land that we live on. We heard many times from people in these organizations that the people who volunteer often come back again and say that they have grown a greater connection with the land that they live on. So once we had finished our interviews, we decided to create a final table with just kind of some of the general information that we thought would be important for people visiting CCA's website to see. We included information like the lead contact of each organization, volunteer opportunities, the commitment level, special events, and COVID precautions, just things that we thought would be important for people to decide what organization works best for them. And then from there, we included a learn more section. And this is where we created about one-page summaries for each organization that we interviewed. We did this in a Q&A format so people could find the information easily and determine if this was an organization that they'd be interested in volunteering for.
So although the goals of our project were mostly to be achieved this quarter, we hope that the work we have done this past quarter will create a good foundation for CCA to continue this research on their own or with future Sustainability Studio students. For CCA's website, we created the informational table and summaries of our findings from each organization's interview. We hope that the information will be easily accessible, increase volunteer outreach for the organizations, will make information on urban forests be more widely known, and overall help people become involved in the fight to mitigate climate change. We also created 2 surveys that CCA will put on their website. They are linked on this slide, and then on the next slide are a few images of what these surveys look like. The first survey is for organizations that we did not have time to interview this quarter that are also involved in urban forestry and are looking for volunteers. This is a way for organizations to answer the questions without needing to attend an interview. We hope that the information from this survey can also be added to the informational table on CCA's website. The second survey is for volunteers to report back on their involvement with urban forestry and their work with these organizations. Organizations and CCA can use this information to improve overall outreach and accessibility. To conclude, over the course of the quarter, we were able to successfully answer our research questions and explore many urban forestry volunteer opportunities in the Seattle area. We met our learning objectives and created a solid basis for CCA to continue research on this topic in the future. We came into this project with little experience in this type of research and conducting interviews, so our project scope developed over the quarter as we got more comfortable with this type of work. We gained more experience with the interviews and became more comfortable talking and asking the right types of questions to best suit our research goals. We have 4 main recommendations for Cascadia climate action. The first includes setting up a volunteer with the organizations presented in the table we have made. The second is for CCA to utilize the Google survey for organizations, and the third is the survey for volunteers. The last is to find a way for users to search for key terms in the table on the website, such as low commitment, physical work, or policy. This slide, we have the links to all the websites of the organizations that we interviewed. And this is a group photo from our first interview. Thank you so much for listening. We would like to thank Cascadia Climate Action, specifically Mary and Lily, for working with us on this project and giving us the opportunity to work alongside a great organization. We would also like to thank all the organizations that we interviewed for taking the time to meet with us and being part of our project. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask us now. Here are some of our references.
I'm kind of curious on how you guys felt doing interviews and what skills you think you've gained from that.
Yeah, I think at first it was pretty nerve-wracking for all of us, but most of the interviews we tried to do it together. So it was really nice to be able to rely on each other and work with one another, making sure that if there were any awkward silences or anything, one of us could fill it up. But yeah, I think probably what I learned the most was just kind of going with the flow of the conversation. We would have questions set up and prepared, so we would go into the interviews prepared, but we would kind of also just go with the flow of the conversation and ask questions that we thought were appropriate for the time.
Yeah, it was really great to see how the 4 of us kind of got into a rhythm throughout the quarter and got more comfortable with speaking with one another. And I think that really reflected how well we did in the interviews.
Yeah, at the beginning of the quarter, we were using 4 people for every interview. And I think our last 3 interviews, we only had 2 people. So that shows that we were able to gain that confidence throughout the quarter.
Nice job, group. I have a question for you all. This project is interesting to me because it's a small pie slice of something that could become a really, really large kind of initiative. And that's an exciting opportunity. And I'm curious if in any of your interviews and conversations or in any of your group conversations, you kind of uncovered or talked about what you think some of the current barriers to volunteering are. I think a lot of people maybe want to volunteer, but they're like, oh, I don't know what opportunity there is. Were there any other barriers, or do you really think like making that information of opportunities accessible is going to like open the floodgates?
I think having the opportunities listed is really important, so that's easy to find. But what we really learned is every organization that we interviewed, there were 7, they were all so different. Like maybe like 2 of them were similar, sometimes they would partner, but at the end of the day, like the opportunities they had for volunteers were like radically different. So I think people often get frightened that they're gonna enter an organization and have this burden to like volunteer somewhere that they're not actually having fun, or like they're not up to par with the skills that you might need. So sorting through all these organizations, the table is really beneficial for this because you can see like different skill levels. Some of them, they're like, oh, you can just walk in, have no background experience, and we'll get you going. But other times it's a higher commitment level. So this really clarifies that for people interested.
Yeah, and we also saw that a lot of the organizations that we interviewed do have limited outreach initiatives right now. So people like CCA, who are giving all these opportunities available on a platform, are really useful. There were a lot of organizations that were like, we'll take volunteers for our events, but we also need people to run social media and people to make flyers and post them everywhere and things like that. And we also found there were a couple organizations that benefited by COVID having them put classes online. They got more involvement in that way. Just like regionally, people from Canada can come take a class on pruning.
Thank you. Are there any last questions for this group? All right, thank you all. We are going to move on to our next presentation, who was with our group working with Yes Farm. Who do we have screen sharing? Is it Julia?
Yes, give me 1 second.
Eric.
Oh, here we go. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our project on mapping the farm, creating effective communication and engaging with a diverse community. Here is a brief agenda of our talk today. We're going to go through a client introduction, methodology and process, research components, final design, and our next steps. My name is Julia. Our team consists of me, Daniela, Mia, and Vanessa. And let's dive into our project.
Mia, we can't hear you.
Are you there, Mia?
Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me now?
We can't hear you anymore. I see your mouth moving, but don't hear the sound.
I think I should be good now. So before we talk about who Yes Farm is, we wanted to give some context as to where they are located, since they're actually right in our backyard. As you can see on the map here, Yes Farm is located just south of the UW campus and of downtown Seattle, and they're in the Yesler Terrace neighborhood, which is about a 10 to 15 minute drive from us here at UW.
So now who is Yes Farm? Yes Farm is a branch off of a Seattle nonprofit called Black Farmers Collective, and their mission is to create a space for the community and especially for BIPOC members of the community to come together and learn and grow food together. And Yes Farm does this by engaging with a variety of community partners to work with BIPOC and utilize sustainable agricultural techniques. And as we saw on the last map, Yes Farm is located in the Yesler Terrace neighborhood, which has a population where over half identify as non-white. So these importance are all especially important in this area for working towards addressing inequities faced by communities of color and also to cultivate a sense of community and inclusion in an area of Seattle that is predominantly BIPOC. So the primary objective of our project was to create an engaging map for Yes Farm to serve as welcoming and explanatory signage for the farm and for visitors who might be walking through. The map that we designed is targeted at communicating with a diverse community through easily readable icons in English and Spanish.
Now, going into our methodology, because of the qualitative nature of our project, our research had to reflect that. And we sought to foster ways to promote community engagement through the Yes Farm. And our preliminary research reflects our design concepts. We also met continually as we constructed our project with our clients to refine our designs and make sure that all of our goals were being met. And here are some of our research findings that affected our final design. One of them simply acknowledges that having signs promotes your community engagement. And also treating the design process as a marketing strategy allows us to create a process that can be replicated for future engagement. We also found that environmental education is very necessary, and signs can help bridge the gap between public and nonprofit sectors.
After conducting some of that preliminary research, our group took a trip to the farm to meet with Ray and Hannah, who were our clients for this project, and also to do a walkthrough of the farm just so that we could get a sense of the layout and the various projects that were going on. So the slide just has a few photos of our first visit out there. And moving on to the actual design for our project, on this slide you can see a rough visual of the process that we went through when creating our final draft. We of course made a lot of little edits along the way as well, but these 3 drafts are the main ones that we presented to our clients throughout the quarter. For draft 1 on the left there, you can see that we had a really basic outline for where we wanted the various map elements to be placed, but nothing had really been refined yet. At this stage in the process, we also knew that we wanted to utilize Canva to create the full banner design, but we hadn't figured out what program we wanted to use to draw the actual map. And in this stage, again, we really just wanted to get an idea of placement so that we could bring that to our clients and get their feedback on the design. As we moved from draft 1 to draft 2, this was definitely our biggest stage in the design process. At this point, we had decided that we wanted to use Photoshop to create the design for the map. So you can see we went from just a kind of a screen grab from Google Images to a lot more refined design for that. And here we also started to play around with some various icons for the map and for our key. And our client also provided us with a PDF of their logo, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner there. In this stage, we were also collaborating as a group to choose the various fonts that you see on the poster and also mess around with the color and try to get that to match the Yes Farm logo. And then for our final draft, I won't go into too much detail here. In our following slides, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into our editing process for that final draft and also how our research findings that Julia touched on contributed to that design.
Yeah, so let's dive into how our research is reflected in our design. One thing that you just might find right off the bat is how we engage with Yes Farm's logo by having the same color palette that allows it to flow really well. And yeah, we're going to talk about some other elements too.
So we made use of both native speakers and web translators to create the Spanish names on the signage. This not only makes Spanish speakers be and feel more included in the community, but there's also like a greater sense of inclusion for other members of other minority groups, seeing that a secondary language is incorporated on the signage as well.
Here on the bottom, we also chose to place the social media elements lower because we wanted to keep in mind the concept of easy access for all that visit or stumble upon the farm. And here you can also see we included their primary social media platform, which happened to be Facebook, along with a traditional URL link and a new QR code that will directly send community members to their website.
And finally, we realized that not everybody who is visiting the farm is going to be able to see their native language represented on the signage. And there's also a large population of children that walk through that we want to engage with through this signage as well. So for those reasons, we included the visual icons that I touched on in the previous slide as part of our final design. And as we wrapped up our signage design, we were also working as a group to come up with some next steps for Yes Farm based both on our research and on opportunities for expanding on our project. So our first recommendation that we have here, when we initially met with Ray and Hannah at Yes Farm, we had talked about a variety of different signage opportunities for the farm. And due to time constraints, we weren't able to tackle all of these ideas. However, one which we would really love to see implemented in the future is a walking tour of the farm. Our map can kind of serve as a layout of the farm, and we envision having smaller signs placed at each of the different sections of the farm with information on the various projects. And on this side, you can see an example of what one of these smaller signs might look like. This one in particular is a template for the Yes Farm plot section of the farm. And expanding on this sort of walking tour will really help visitors to engage with and learn about the different projects going on. And it also provides an opportunity for additional signage to be created in the future as the farm expands.
Because social media is vital in sustaining constant support for Yes Farm's mission, one recommendation we encourage to our client is to continually stay active on all social media platforms. This will allow potential members of the community to learn about upcoming events and volunteering opportunities. And also keeping that in mind, we focused key elements like a link to Yes Farm's digital handle for their Facebook on the sign because we recognize it to be their most active social media. And here you can see we included a screen grab of their current activities with a picture of farm members uploaded, along with posts about events happening, like cookouts they do using their own produce that are open to all. We also chose to include both a QR code and a traditional URL link to ensure that we aren't creating a gap in a multi-generational world with people living on different levels of technology access. And additionally to that, creating another option other than a QR code ensures that those who don't have access to a compatible device can still be able to participate in engaging with the farm. And continuing with the focus of accessibility, Daniela will now explain the next recommendation.
Yes, so we also recommend the implementation of multiple languages present on signage so that the variety of different community members can be reached as well. As stated in the City of Seattle official website, besides English, Spanish is the most widely spoken language in the Seattle area, with Chinese in third place. There is also a large percentage of Somali and Amharic speakers who live in the area. Between these constraints of our project, we were able to develop Spanish translations for a portion of the signage, but in the future, we envision an opportunity to include these languages on signage as well, and we'll provide the farm directors and managers with templates of the original signs that can be edited for the future.
All right, and that wraps up our presentation. One more thing I'm going to add is we actually were able to print out our sign, and we're really excited to deliver that. I think Vanessa might be able to show us if she has it.
Yeah, it's 6 feet and I am not 6 feet. So we'll see how I do. But with the help of the mill on campus, we were able to make this sign, and we chose to keep some white left over just so when Yes Farm puts grommets on, they have kind of a little bit of wiggle room to their addition. So I don't know if you guys were able to see that.
Yeah, looks awesome. And with that any questions, we're happy to take. You can follow this QR code to learn more and get involved at Yes Farm. And we want to thank Ray and Hannah again for just being awesome clients this quarter. Yeah, Ray.
Yes, thanks so much, everybody, for doing this. I'm excited you're able to print that sign. We're looking forward to getting it and putting it up. Yeah, it was a really fun to be able to work with the students. They mentioned that there was a little bit of a time constraint in terms of making those signs. I'll tell you what it was, is that we didn't get the information to them quick enough. So they would have had a few more, but we're going to work on that. So thank you very much. We're taking your advice in elevating social media. So we're going to get one of our folks that's been, we're expanding our crew. And so social media is going to be part of that. So I really appreciate that. And then I will say that now that we have this base, we can bring this text and this signage to our partners, the Seattle Housing Authority. And I'm hoping that they'll be able to help us with translation, right? Because there's lots of languages spoken in the area. So that's really a big thing. So, I mean, again, I just want to thank you. I don't really have any questions. We've talked quite a bit about it, but I do want to thank you and Alexa for, supporting us in this effort. And everyone is welcome to come down and volunteer. It's open for everybody. There was an earlier question in another project about volunteerism. And I think we're lucky that we have an outdoor space, people can volunteer and have fun. And so I think that's what brings our volunteers. So if you're trying to set up volunteers, really trying to make folks welcome, make them feel like they did something important and are part of something. And I think those would be our recommendations for Yes Farm. Hannah wouldn't be here, but she's actually on the farm with a group of volunteers. So that's what we're all about, is trying to grow this food for community. So thanks very much. Really exciting to be part of this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ray. Like we said, we had an awesome time working with you this quarter.
Awesome. Are there any other questions for this group? All right. Well, nice job, everyone. I am very excited to see you actually got that sign printed. That is awesome. I think I told you, I don't know if I've ever had a group actually that did design work, get it produced. So super exciting to see that that's a resource for students on campus, and that you're able to share that with the farm. So
yeah. One thing I will say about the mill is I did think it was going to be free. And when we got there, it was a small charge. I think it was like $28, but compared to all other printing options, it's so much cheaper. I think we had one quote that was like $150.
So a pretty remarkable difference.
Well, we'll make sure we pay for that, since I guess there was no budget from the class. So we don't need you to swallow that piece. Okay.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Nice job, group. So we are on to our final presentation for the day, which looked at reducing greenhouse gas emissions in residential homes in Seattle. We've already got our screen share. Alina is set. You guys are good to go.
Hello, everyone. So this quarter, my team and I, we worked let's see. Okay, sorry for that. We work with the People for Climate Action in the 43rd District, Democrats, and Environmental Caucus. And so on that team, it was me, Jasmine, Nina, Barb, and Alina. And so for our presentation today, we are going to be talking about the scope of our project, the methods we use, the global case studies we looked at, the local case studies, the incentives, the programs and policies, and the recommendations that we came up based off our recommendation.
So for the scope of our project, it was how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in single-family homes. So a key component of answering our research question was to identify what Seattle can do to move towards sustainable practices in pre-existing single-family homes.
Our method was research. We divided research into 3 parts: case studies, incentives, and programs. For the case studies, we researched policy locally and globally on residential buildings. For incentives, there are 3 types of incentives: tax credits, rebates, and loan to help improving residential buildings. For the last one, it's program-based research, including what Seattle has been done so far to reduce greenhouse gas emission and what kind of bills and ordinance could help. For global case studies, greenhouse gas emissions from homes account for between 25 to 27% of global emissions. Globally, this program of work is too important to fail, so it makes sense to conduct a research of how different countries are approaching the problem to highlight opportunity to learn from one another. Our global case studies were based on Europe. In broad perspective, European Union established energy performance of buildings directed to support member countries to improve building energy efficiency. In their policy, there's a system called minimum energy performance standard to require the renovation of the worst performing buildings. Following this policy, residential buildings should be renovated to perform better by 2030. United Kingdom has policy called Occupant Behavior. It's about how they respond to the design, systems, and controls offered in homes, and it's central to how well buildings perform. Behavior affecting performance, including heating and ventilation systems, such as thermostat adjustment and window opening, the use of electrical appliance and lighting, hot water usage, and variable patterns of occupancy as well. The 6 carbon budget in residential buildings is about decarbonization of heat, including gas cooking, and garden machinery, behavior change, fabric efficiency, and fuel switching to drive the transition to net zero carbon buildings. For the Germany, it's called KfW, which is a German state-owned investment and development bank. It has been supporting energy saving in residential buildings for the past 10 years. It's been over 4 million housing units, has either been built or refurbished to make them more energy efficient during this period. KfW has issued close to Europe dollar up to 100 billion in loans or grants to builders and renovators as part of the energy efficient construction and refurbishment programs. For France, French government provides financial support for improving the energy performance of property owners with insufficient energy efficient house. It called France Green Home Retrofit Policy. Since 2020, the new grant-based system superseded the previous tax credit-based system. Depends on taxable income and the potential energy savings that could arise from major on home. This policy grants typical cover up to 40% of the retrofit bill.
So for local case studies, we looked at 2 different ones. The first being a retrofit of a house built in 1915, located in Dayton, Washington. And the yearly utility bill prior to the retrofit cost $3,500. And after the retrofit, they were projected to save $2,375 a year. And the total cost of the overall project was $11,500, which is a lot. So they figured out that it would take 5 to 6 years for the costs to even out. And then for the next case study we looked at, it was the Bullitt Center located in Capitol Hill, which is a living building with 0 carbon emissions or waste. And the purpose of this building was to be a model for 21st century sustainability. And it includes radiant in-floor heating and cooling, composting toilets, natural ventilation, and passive cooling.
I looked into 3 major incentive options: tax credits, rebates, and loans, to see which is most effective. So the advantages of tax credits is that it can cover a broad range of sustainable options under one application, providing homeowners with the opportunity to make multiple switches at once, and one application also leads to higher completion rates. Unused tax credits also can be carried over for multiple years, allowing for a larger time frame of installation and to earn money back. The disadvantages of tax credits is that they can't be collected until after tax returns are filed in the year following the purchase, which isn't efficient. It is also common for these programs to cap participants by only allowing a certain percentage to be offset. For rebate programs, advantages are that it offers a tax-free cash reimbursement, as the IRS views rebates as a reduction in the price paid rather than an income. It also allows for a long duration of coverage with options for various forms of sustainable technology. However, it typically does not offer any reimbursement on sales tax, so you may not receive the maximum amount of money. Delays and mix-ups are also extremely common with this option. For loan programs, it allows participants to receive money upfront. It can be flexible in terms of payback costs and lengths. However, interest rates can be high as there is no set rule. The biggest issue with loan programs are that they are inequitable, as it restricts those who have smaller incomes from applying, or if it is allowed, companies can inflate interest rates. Also, sometimes companies can add additional fees if trying to repay the loan before the end of the loan term, especially if there is a fixed interest rate.
There is numerous programs and policies that we researched that could be applicable to our goal. Among those programs is the Tune Up program, which is a current incentive program to assist in accelerating Seattle building owners to convert their buildings to be more energy and water efficient. There's also the Green Up program, which is a program that you can choose to participate by matching your electricity bill, and you can do this through either a match or a block. And so a match would be matching your electricity bill, or a block, which you can contribute to with as little as $1. And this is significant in the fact that the more participants there are, then it helps to create more renewable energy options and helps to modernize the renewable energy grid. So City Light currently has a solar program that even if you don't have a solar grid, you can still participate through the community solar option. So they credit your electricity bill for every kilowatt hour sent to their power grid. And through this, there's either the net metering or meter aggregation. And so for net metering, it's the credits for the energy that you produce. You can also qualify for the meter aggregation, which helps you share the excess generation that you from your grid to help others reduce their utility bills. And there's also the program which gives you a rebate for converting from gas to heat pump within City Light. And then, so on the legislative level, Washington State is currently working to pass and amend laws to achieve zero emissions. However, Seattle specifically differs from Washington State by including additional ordinances that has the potential to push Seattle to be a leader in the state for achieving those zero emissions.
The first recommendation we have is to lobby for rebate and tax credit programs, as loan programs exclude individuals with lower income amounts and are less attractive to homeowners. It is also important to lobby for a tax exemption with only one application process. Conducting outreach to successful programs around the US, such as New York's Solar Electric Tax Program and Illinois' Renewable Energy Rebate Program, would be a great next step.
And so for the second recommendation, we wanted to lobby for retrofitting opportunities. So we believe that our clients should lobby local and state governments to incentivize retrofitting single-family homes using the 1915 house case study as a successful example. And then we also believe that our clients should advocate for energy efficient certification programs, such as the Living Building Challenge, which the Bullitt Center is a product of, and it's possible to incorporate aspects of this building into single-family homes.
And lastly, we want to give a big thank you to our clients, Dave and Robin. Is there any questions?
So I was going to ask what your recommendations were, but then you had a whole slide on that, so that was great. I'm wondering this is great work, and it was really fascinating to me to see it all. And, you know, sometimes I look at it and it seems so far from where we are to where we need to be. But I think that there's a lot of ideas here that people could actually make use of and that we could follow up on. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this group and the work they did this quarter? All right, then I have one question. I won't keep us all here too long, but I'm curious. So your group did a lot of in-depth research. What challenges did you face as you tried to distill all of that information and really come to your key takeaways?
So I think the biggest issue was at first figuring out who was going to do what and specifically what we were going to research. Because in the beginning it was kind of vague. We weren't sure like what our clients specifically wanted. So after we kind of got a clearer idea of that, we each had like our own individual research. But for me, at least, I did the local case study research, and it's impossible to find like any information or case studies on houses that have been retrofitted that are like older houses. And like the example I found was in Dayton, Washington, which is not even close to Seattle. So I was hoping I could find more on that, but I wasn't. So then I just decided to look at the Bullitt Center because I knew of it and I knew it was a successful example. So I was glad I was able to incorporate that. Yes, Robin?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I know there are houses that people have done this for in Seattle. And so I think what your experience really points to is the need to get them out there and get them documented so other people can see them and so other people can see that this is possible.
Yeah, definitely.
I can add a little bit on to like the challenge. I think the biggest challenge was a lot of the things we looked at apply to buildings and newer homes in Seattle and not really like what we are looking at specifically the pre-existing. So finding how we can incorporate those incentives that they have for those buildings into the single family home aspect.
Great. Thank you all so much. Really nice job to our final group. So that brings us to the end of our presentations today. I just want to say one last time, a huge round of applause and congratulations to the students on their projects this quarter. It was kind of a funny, like virtual, half in person quarter. So we faced some of those challenges, but I'm always so impressed by the way that students come into class excited to learn and grow and take on hard projects. You know, for many of them, it's their first time working either with a client or in kind of this big consultancy role where you're really taking the lead on problem solving and navigating ambiguity, which is something we talk a lot about. And I think they've all done a great job with that. And of course, I want to wrap up too by thanking our clients once again. Like I said at the beginning, this class would not be possible without our client partners. So thank you so much for your willingness to work with the students and give them a chance to learn and grow. As I mentioned before too, I'll be sending a few follow-up emails just to lay out, you know, what happens next. But primarily, you can watch for an email from me next week that has the students' final reports, their slide deck, and a link to these presentations. So that's all I have for today. I will stay on Zoom until everyone hops off. Students, I know we don't see each other anymore before your final reports are due, but know that I am still available and a resource for you as you're wrapping up that work. So please let me know if any questions arise. Otherwise, I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your week and a wonderful spring. Please let me know if there are any questions. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.